You are tuned in to The Low Band Show, broadcasting from the storm drains under the big city, where a tunnel crew runs this booth on salvaged gear, pipes humming, steady water dripping, hiding surface science and tech news on a low band signal through the drains. I'm your host, Max Hertz. Welcome in. Here's what we do. We take real science and tech news from the surface, summarize it, then go deeper to educate, entertain, and shed light on what's in store for our collective future. News from the net, clear signal, and a little tunnel. If you came for hype, you took a wrong turn at the storm drain.
Welcome in, underground and on the air. Max Hertz here, bringing you the latest from the surface. Wiz, good to have you in the booth today.
Good to be back. Ready when you are.
Today we're diving into the anticipated launch of the digital euro and the concerning trend of IoT devices secretly fueling cyber attacks. We'll also look at AMD reinstating memory encryption in their consumer CPUs and a significant Squid proxy bug that can leak HTTP requests. Finally, we'll take a moment to remember Alan Turing's groundbreaking work on portable voice encryption. Let's get into it. Here's the breakdown. Euronews reported on June 23, 2026, that the digital euro is expected to launch by 2029. This is significant because it's designed to reduce Europe's dependence on US-controlled payment networks. Wiz, for listeners who may not know, what exactly is the ECB?
The ECB, or European Central Bank, is the central bank for the Eurozone, responsible for monetary policy. Its involvement here underscores the ambition to create a sovereign digital currency.
Under the proposal, consumers would hold digital euros in a dedicated wallet with a yet-to-be-determined holding limit. The system would support both online and offline payments and intends to offer high privacy, with the ECB unable to identify users directly from payment data. And for those unfamiliar with the context, what does Europe encompass in this financial discussion?
In this context, Europe primarily refers to the Eurozone, the 20 European Union member states that use the euro as their common currency. This makes it a significant bloc to challenge existing payment hegemonies.
The ECB would provide the underlying infrastructure, while commercial banks and payment service providers would offer digital euro services. Financial institutions expect compensation for their participation, and merchants will likely pay lower fees than current card transactions. What is MasterCard's relevance as a US-controlled payment network?
MasterCard, like Visa, is one of the dominant global payment processing networks, largely based in the US. The digital euro aims to provide an alternative, reducing reliance on these established non-European intermediaries for transactions.
The structure of financial institution compensation remains a contentious issue ahead of negotiations with EU member states. The European Parliament expects to formalize the committee's position during a plenary vote in Strasbourg in early July, with lawmakers aiming for a final agreement before year-end. Wiz, can you clarify what Strasbourg represents here?
Strasbourg is one of the official seats of the European Parliament, where plenary sessions and key votes often take place. It's the legislative battleground for these kinds of agreements.
The path to the digital euro's launch involves many moving parts. We'll keep an eye on how these legislative and financial details resolve.
The headline promises a lot, a concerning future for our connected homes. The Wall Street Journal reported on June 15, 2026, how millions of digital home devices are secretly powering cyber attacks. This isn't just about a slow internet whiz, but about our own devices being weaponized without our knowledge. The journal states that every year, millions of internet-connected devices can contain a secret digital backdoor that opens up access to your home internet so that anyone can surf the web as if they were you. This is especially true for knockoffs that you buy online.
Ah, the gift that keeps on giving. It's a convenient setup for attackers. Your bandwidth, your IP address, all leveraged for someone else's nefarious purposes. And you're none the wiser until your internet slows to a crawl or you get a suspicious email.
In their report, the journal tested digital picture frames from Amazon and streaming devices from Walmart, noting that within minutes of turning the devices on, there was a surge of internet traffic.
Visits to gambling, porn, cryptocurrency, and loads of other sketchy websites started pouring in from users around the world. Wiz, for listeners who may not know, what exactly are residential proxy companies, and why do they matter here?
Residential proxy companies rent access to home networks, using millions of devices like yours as nodes to mask their clients' true origins. It lets them appear to be a normal home user, making it much harder to block or trace their activities for things like ad fraud or credential stuffing.
The problem goes deeper. Hackers have figured out how to seize control of these backdoors, taking over residential networks. Last month, authorities arrested a 23-year-old in Ottawa, saying he'd controlled over 1 million devices to launch some of the largest cyber attacks anyone had ever seen.
The scale is truly unsettling. This isn't just about individual exploitation, but entire botnets formed from unsuspecting smart toasters and cameras. It's a silent army ready to strike on command.
While some companies claim to take action, the company making the picture frame couldn't be reached for comment. The full extent of this problem remains uncertain, and it's an open question how quickly these vulnerabilities can be addressed. I have questions about a recent move from a major chip maker. Ars Technica reported on June 22, 2026, that following user outcry, AMD reinstated memory encryption in some of its consumer CPUs. This is a significant reversal that touches on transparency and consumer trust. Wiz, for listeners who may not know, can you briefly explain what AMD is?
AMD is a semiconductor company, one of the primary developers of computer processors and graphics technologies. They compete directly with Intel and NVIDIA in various markets. This story highlights a classic dilemma for chip makers, balancing performance with security features.
The report states, last week AMD was found to have stripped memory encryption from its consumer CPUs without any warning or notice. Now, following a wave of backlash on social media, the chipmaker has now reinstated the protection, though it still hasn't explained why the safeguard was disabled in the first place. For listeners, Wiz, what exactly is memory encryption, or TSME in this context?
Memory encryption, or TSME, stands for Transparent Secure Memory Encryption. It's a hardware-based security feature that encrypts data stored in a computer's RAM, protecting it from certain types of attacks, like cold boot attacks. The quiet removal sparked valid concern because it affects a fundamental security layer without user consent or clear communication.
AMD issued an email statement regarding this, saying, regarding certain non-pro Ryzen 9000 series desktop processors, a BIOS option to enable memory guard was previously available, but was removed in a recent update. Based on valuable community feedback, we will reinstate this option in an upcoming BIOS release in July. This clarifies the mechanism and timeline.
It's a clear response to the community feedback, including a specific timeline. However, the lack of explanation for the initial removal is still the elephant in the room.
Critics speculate that AMD dropped it in an attempt to steer customers toward more costly CPUs. It's possible, though, that there were less nefarious reasons, such as the difficulty of continued support as chip designs changed. Another possibility is that AMD made the move for performance reasons. Encrypting and decrypting data in memory creates latency. Slowdowns are the enemy of gamers, one of the more popular customer segments using the 9000 line of Ryzen processors.
The less nefarious reasons are plausible. Performance is a huge factor for gamers, and security features can introduce overhead. If many users already disabled it, AMD might have miscalculated the backlash.
The full reasoning behind AMD's initial decision remains unclear, and it's an open question if more transparency will follow. The full reasoning behind AMD's initial decision remains unclear, and it's an open question if more transparency will follow. The headline promises a lot, uncovering a security flaw that's been lurking for decades. The Hacker News reported on June 18, 2026, about a 29-year-old bug in the Squid web proxy dubbed Squidbleed. This flaw can leak Cleartext HTTP requests. Wiz, what makes a bug this old so concerning now?
Finding a bug that old is like discovering a new room in a very familiar house. It shows how deeply certain assumptions can hide vulnerabilities, often until someone with a fresh perspective or new tools comes along.
Let's dive into the specifics. The article states that this bug, tracked as CVE 2026-47729, can let an authorized proxy user retrieve fragments of another user's Cleartext HTTP requests, including credentials and session tokens. Wiz, for listeners who may not know, what exactly is a CVE?
A CVE, or Common Vulnerabilities and Exposures, is essentially a unique identifier for publicly known cybersecurity vulnerabilities. It helps everyone track and reference specific flaws. In this case, it means Squidbleed has its own entry in the global vulnerability database.
So the bug is in Squid, but the attack isn't from just anyone on the internet. The article describes this as an attack by a trusted client, someone already permitted to use the proxy, typical in shared networks like schools or public Wi-Fi. The leak also only reaches traffic that Squid can process. Wiz, what's the difference between Cleartext HTTP and HTTPS, and why does that matter here?
HTTP is like sending a postcard. Anyone can read it. HTTPS, using TLS, is like sending a sealed letter. The content is encrypted, so even if the proxy handles it, it can't see inside. This means the bug only exposes unencrypted data, which is still a significant risk for older systems or misconfigurations.
The attacker also needs the proxy to reach an FTP server they control on port 21, both of which are on by default. The recommendation is to turn FTP off, as Chromium dropped it years ago, and most networks carry almost none of it. Wiz, can you explain what FTP is for our audience?
FTP, or File Transfer Protocol, is an older method for moving files between computers on a network. While once common, its unencrypted nature means most modern web traffic has moved to more secure alternatives like HTTPS for file transfers, making it largely obsolete and a potential attack vector if left enabled.
The risk is rated as moderate by SUSE, with a CVSS score of 6.5. The primary impact is confidentiality, with no integrity or availability concerns. While a patch exists, the public discussion about specific versions remains inconsistent. It remains to be seen how quickly these details will be resolved, and whether further verification is needed for all distributions.
IEEE Spectrum reported on June 17, 2026, about a fascinating little-known piece of history. Here's the headline: Remembering when Alan Turing developed a portable voice encryption device. This discovery sheds new light on the broader scope of his genius beyond cryptography. Wiz, are you ready to dive into this?
Absolutely, Max. This sounds like an excellent deep dive into the practical side of a legend, especially considering the era's engineering constraints.
Indeed. Turing's private papers, known as the Bailey Papers, reveal he, quote, had produced a working model of a portable voice encryption device. He even demonstrated it using a Winston Churchill speech recording. Copeland notes, weighing just 39 kilograms, including its power pack, Delilah would be at home in a truck, a trench, or a large backpack.
A portable device at 39 kilograms truly puts the portable into historical context. It highlights the ambition to secure communications in wartime, even with what we now consider cumbersome equipment.
The story gets more intricate. Turing's work at Bletchley Park actually informed the Delilah experimentation. He drew inspiration from one of the German cipher machines they had decoded at Bletchley. Not the famed Enigma machine, but rather the SZ42. Wiz, for listeners who may not know, can you briefly explain who Alan Turing was and the significance of Bletchley Park and the German Enigma machine?
Alan Turing was a brilliant British mathematician, often considered the father of theoretical computer science. Bletchley Park was the top-secret UK code-breaking center during World War II, where he played a pivotal role in cracking the German Enigma machine, which encrypted military communications.
The article continues, mentioning that the SZ42 utilized a 5-bit telegraph code, which Copeland notes was a forerunner of ASCII and Unicode, and is still used by some ham radio operators. Wiz, can you briefly explain what ASCII is for our audience?
ASCII, the American Standard Code for Information Interchange, is a character encoding standard for electronic communication. It's foundational to how computers represent text. a direct ancestor to modern encoding schemes like Unicode.
Now, the article explains why Delilah ultimately faded. The reason Delilah fell to the wayside of history isn't because it was a failure, but rather because it simply wasn't needed anymore. By the time Turing had built and demonstrated his device, the war was over. It concludes, so funding for the project stopped, and Turing's 2-year experiment ended with a whimper.
A classic case of brilliant innovation outrunning its immediate necessity. Imagine spending 2 years on a groundbreaking project, only for its utility to vanish overnight. It's a footnote, as the article says, but a significant one for understanding the breadth of his work.
Indeed. It remains an open question how many other incredible projects from that era never saw the light of day, simply because the war ended. The full scope of these untold stories is still unknown. We'll be back after this. All right, that's our board for today, and it was certainly a packed session with a lot to consider. We started with the evolving landscape of digital finance, tracing the complex path to a digital euro. Then we pivoted to a stark warning about the digital devices in our homes and how they can be silently co-opted for widespread cyber attacks. The conversation then took us into the realm of hardware security, examining AMD's decision to reinstate memory encryption in consumer CPUs and the persistent threat of vulnerabilities like the long-standing Squidbleed bug, reminding us that vigilance is always necessary. Finally, we took a fascinating look back at Alan Turing's Delilah, a powerful voice encryption device that became a casualty of the war's end, raising questions about other forgotten innovations. Each of these stories highlights the intricate dance between innovation, security, and human intention. It's a complex tapestry, and the threads continue to evolve. We've got more tunnel signal coming through with developments on these and other fronts. Keep that curiosity burning, and we'll keep tracking the signal in the next episode.
It's certainly a lot to consider. If we missed an angle, or you have further questions on these topics, please drop us a comment. We read them down here in the tunnel. And if this signal helped you stay informed, a like or subscribe keeps the pipes humming. More surface news and deeper dives are coming through the grate soon. Until then, stay curious, and we'll catch you next time on The Low Band Show.